Yeah, hiding. Welcome, everybody. I'm now calling this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Today is February 2nd, 2024. We're noticed from 12 to 12:30, but I'm going to ask the members to extend to 1:30. But before we do that, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Member Myers.
Here.
Member Martinez.
Present.
Member Rivera.
Present.
Member Bronga.
Here.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Chair Constant.
Here.
Vice Chair Zolotel. Here. Member Cross.
He should be here any minute.
Member Volland.
He is excused.
Member Brawley.
Here.
Member Salt.
Here.
Member Presverdia.
I haven't heard from him yet.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Hurt, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Brawley, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Yes, happy to do that. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous peoples of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
I think a land acknowledgement is the perfect place to start today's meeting. Today we have four items on the agenda. We'll move through them one at a time. The first one is simply to introduce an ordinance. It's item 4A AO 2024-15, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 21.13.060 to remove the requirement to pay a percentage of development projects costs for non-conforming characteristics of use into a municipal public improvement fund under certain circumstances. Is there a motion?
Move to introduce.
Oh, yeah, the public hearing date is set for 2/27. Thank you. I heard a motion to introduce by Ms. Brawley,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Zolotel. Is there a third? Third by Mr. Cross. Thank you. That item is introduced and set for public hearing at the meeting 2/27/2024. Now the fun part of the meeting. Item 5A, Resolution AR 2024-41, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing Maria Downey and celebrating her retirement after more than 4 decades of excellence in local broadcast journalism. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Ms. Zolotel, seconded by Ms. Brawley. I'm going to go ahead and ask for unanimous consent on this. And before I do that, I would note we're going to add all members and the mayor as co-sponsors to this item. But I'd like to ask for unanimous consent. Is there any objection to the adoption of this item? Hearing and seeing none. Before we read the resolution, we'll start with a short video. All right, Ms. Brawley.
Would like me to read it? Sorry. Sorry about that. Resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing Maria Downey and celebrating her retirement after more than 4 decades of excellence in local broadcast journalism. Whereas in January 2024, Maria Downey announced her retirement from broadcast journalism after more than 40 years of reporting in Anchorage, Alaska. And whereas Maria first moved to Anchorage, Alaska with her spouse in 1981. And whereas Maria grew roots as an Anchorage journalist working at the former TV station Channel 5 KIMO, where she reported for 4 years and hosted the morning program Good Morning Alaska. And whereas in 1985, Maria became a full-time news anchor after quickly joining the team at Channel 2, Alaska's news source, then known as KTUU, and became a familiar face, trustworthy voice, and welcome presence in households throughout the municipality and the state of Alaska for 38 years. And whereas over 40 years, Maria reported on many of our state's most memorable moments, including the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, the 7.1 earthquake in 2018, historic elections at the state and local levels, and community events. Whereas Maria's legacy is reflected in the next generation of journalists across the state and the country, having coordinated the internship program at Channel 2 and mentored dozens of young journalists who are now working full-time in the field. And whereas Maria's service and volunteerism includes tenure on the Special Olympics of Alaska Board, service on the Atwood Board, and more than 25 years of leadership to the KTUU Muscular Dystrophy Association Labor Day Telethon, which has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in Alaska for MDA. And whereas in addition to accolades from the Alaska Athena Society, the YMCA Women of Achievement Awards, Maria was also inducted into the Alaska Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame in 2016. And whereas Maria has dedicated more than 4 decades of her life and career to local journalism and making Alaska a better, happier place for those who call it home. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly celebrates and honors Maria Downey for her contributions to our community and local journalism over 4 decades and her lasting legacy of integrity, care, and positive community impact. Passed and approved by the Assembly this 2nd day of February 2024.
There you go. It's on. One more time. Press it once more. Just press it and let it go. There it is. You're
I
on.
think I might have been in broadcasting for a few years, but I'm going to keep it brief. I know you have a lot of important issues on your agenda. I just want to thank you so much. This means so much to me to be recognized by all of you in our community that I love so much. Thank you very much. I'm just so touched by this and all you had to say. And I'm staying in Anchorage because it's my home and I love this place. And I really want to thank all of you, the assembly, staff members, all in City Hall, the mayor's office, for your service. You have a lot of tough issues that you tackle all the time to keep our city safe and wonderful. And I want to thank you all for taking this on and for your service and for continued work in the future to make it even a better place for our kids to live and for the community in the future. Thank you so much. This means so much to me. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
And I will just say thank you. And to folks who are wondering why we did it at this special meeting, she wasn't available on the meeting of the 13th. And so we decided that today was the day we had a special meeting and we would make it special. And just so you know, the only other time since I've been on the body in 8 years we've done this was for the retirement of Rhonda. And so you're in exceptional company. Yeah, thank you.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. Now get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up on the agenda is where it gets spicy. We have Resolution AR 2024-40, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly submitting public comment on the draft Fish and Wildlife Program for the Eklutna hydroelectric project. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Motion
Second.
to approve by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by Ms. Brawley. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank the chair and clerk's office for making a special meeting possible. The draft Fish and Wildlife Program for the Eklutna hydroelectric project is currently open for public comment. That public comment period ends on the 19th of February. And given our meeting schedule and our process, it's really important that we make space for us to put our public comments forward, be able to debate them, finalize them. And then there'll be the opportunity, as always, with a resolution for the mayor to potentially exercise his veto authority, and then the opportunity for an override. And all of that should occur before the 19th so that the final comments can be submitted. So that is the reason I requested this special meeting. I also, before we dig into this, want to stress how important I think this is. This isn't just any old public comment. I think often public comment on pending regulations or legislation can feel really like it's not going to be taken into account. And here we've raised some issues that I think need to be resolved before this project moves forward. And so we're hoping this public comment lays the foundation to come together for collaborative solutions moving forward. We have, for members, set the public comments up in a structure here where it's really in some buckets, some areas of concern that really tie closely to our role as appropriators, as legislators and policymakers within the municipality. It's not so much about which option is the right option, it's does the process yield what we need in order to make a well-informed decision that could have implications for ratepayers of a number of regulated utilities within the municipality, including our own, which is Alaska Wastewater Utility, impacts to that utility potentially, and then impacts to taxpayers. And so we are really staying in our lane and having this conversation today about what it is we need in order to make sure we're giving fulsome comment. We raised some issues that we're not sure we have all of the information, and that we can hopefully reset the table. If there's anything I hope to achieve with this public comment today is that we reset the table, we take the time to bring all the interested stakeholders back to the table to effectuate the goals of the 1991 agreement to restore fish to the Eklutna River, protect the interest of hydropower, protect the interest of clean and greatly accessible drinking water, and to think bigger about this, quite frankly. I think this is a generational project. And to me, that means bringing in all of the stakeholders and saying, not how do we narrowly meet the terms of the 91 agreement, but how do we do something that has a lasting and important and meaningful impact on our community, and really acknowledges the position and our acknowledgement of a government-to relationship with the native village of Eklutna. So with that, Mr. Chair, those are my initial comments on this. I'm hoping we can proceed by maybe asking a few questions about the missing information that we've flagged in the resolution, and then kind of take it from there. Want to do that first? Okay. Per the chair's request, I can certainly go section by section and give a brief summary. I had the pleasure of drafting this, and it is lengthy. So the whereas clauses really just set the stage, who the parties are, and the process to date. The resolve section are those buckets of comments that I mentioned. So the first is entitled a non-compliant process. And really this gets to whether or not the process employed to date meets the intention of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So the 91 agreement replaced what we call the FERC process, or FERC oversight of this this mitigation. And FERC contemplates using the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA type process. For those of us in government, NEPA is really familiar. It's how we evaluate a number of alternatives before we engage in a big capital type project, and say whether or not we should move forward with any of those within particular standards. We believe that what's been put forward, the comments in here say that what we believe is put forward to date in the draft program doesn't really meet the intent here, because an alternative. One has really been put forward, not a number of alternatives, which could include dam removal or possibly doing nothing, because that is also always an alternative. We go on to say that this really doesn't look like processes we're familiar with. The port modernization project, when we have big road projects through our AMATS process, looks at a number of alternatives. And again, here, we've been asked to evaluate a single alternative. That is not consistent with what we're used to doing in major capital projects and major investments. So we're asking that the process go back to look for more alternatives and really evaluate all the potential alternatives. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is potential impacts to Anchorage drinking water. So the proposed alternative, this portal valve would hook into AWU infrastructure. And you can't separate out what's happening with the proposed alternative from the fact that we have the Eklutna water treatment facility. And so we have questions about the intersection of those two things. We learned very recently that there may be a signed agreement between AWU and the owners about water rights, but we haven't been able to get that today. And so that's really hard to judge the landscape of our access to water for our community, what effect it could have on AWU ratepayers, which is AWU is a regulated utility. So really just raises more questions knowing this agreement is out there that we haven't seen than it's been able to answer about the intersection of these things. And I'll just mention that I've been on this body almost 5 years, and this has been an issue before the body the entire time. We've not been briefed or had many discussions with AWU in that entire time. And it feels like a really big missing piece of the puzzle. Similarly, we engaged an expert through the budget in November because we started to ask questions. What are the water implications? And so that expert has done some analysis on the portal valve option. His name is Don Spiegel. He helped design the AWU system out at Eklutna, and he says the portal valve cannot provide adequate Eklutna River restoration flows, nor can it provide year-round water without interruption. Thus, it is his opinion that the portal valve as currently configured is fatally flawed and other Eklutna River restoration alternatives should be studied further. And then just to add one more layer about water, it's been been learning a lot about water here in the last month, is AWU recently briefed us at an Enterprise Utilities Oversight Committee meeting that there's just this changing regulatory landscape around drinking water. There's more concern about forever chemicals, often known as PFAS, where those are, how they'll be regulated, what it might impact to our ground wells and other sources of our water. And that regulatory landscape will take a while to shake out for Anchorage. And I think it's really important that we understand that because our water comes from three places: Eklutna, ground wells, and then Ship Creek. And we're not the only demand for some of that water. And so we have some questions about what all of that will mean. So that's that bucket. The next one is incomplete analysis and insufficient mitigation. We think that, based on what our expert has said and what we've seen in the reports, that the portal valve alternative is just comes up short. It's not going to ensure that fish are constantly able to move through. It's really dependent on a number of circumstances outside of control, as well as we haven't seen a full analysis of a dam removal, which the native village of Eklutna has asked for. And we haven't seen any full analysis of what we consider full river restoration. The last is poor coordination and questionable use of public funds. Here, really, we think that it's important to understand exactly what's being asked of the public to contribute. The proposal put forward has ratepayer increases, incremental ratepayer increases for MEA and CEA, so Matanuska Electra and Chugach Electric ratepayers. There also is a property tax implication for property taxpayers in the municipality. Lots of questions about that. Would that be a special tax levy? Would we have to make cuts to our current budget in order to absorb those expenses? How many years would we have the commitment for that property tax? And I think this is where the thinking has really fallen short, whereas we were thinking much broader about this and bringing really, truly all the stakeholders to the table, such as Alaska Department of Transportation, who has interest, AWU, who has interest, the municipality has interest in talking about what we ultimately want to achieve and all the ways to achieve it and all the interests in the area. We could really talk about leveraging and braiding funds across a number of sources to really achieve that transformation. So since we don't necessarily know the impacts, we have asked for a couple of things to happen in the final sections. So first, it's very clear the Anchorage Assembly cannot endorse and thus imposes the draft fish and wildlife program. We then say the municipality of Anchorage, as policy, does not intend to issue authorizations or provide any funds or any other form of support of the draft fish and wildlife program or any alternative that does not restore the full length of the Eklutna River and comply with the policy of the municipality. And that's codified, if anyone wants to look it up, in our code at 26.30.025A. Additionally, we asked the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, under its authority to initiate investigation into the practices and facilities of public utilities, to review, under that authority, to review the draft fish and wildlife program and examine any impacts on the regulated utilities, including but not limited to Chugach Electric, Matanuska Electric, Anchorage Hydropower, and AWU, specifically with regard to impacts of access to uninterrupted service and their rates before the final fish and wildlife program is transmitted to the governor for review and approval. And then we ask for a 2-year extension and a pause. So the great thing about how this 1991 agreement is structured is it's an agreement amongst parties. And those parties can agree to do things like take a pause for 2 years. And that's what we're really asking for. If we could take a pause, take this more holistic view, and really come back to the table, reset the table, we think that the issues here are just too significant to rush through or push something through so that something can be transmitted to the governor by April. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm not seeing anyone in the queue. Does anyone wish to get in the queue right now? For my part, I have asked the municipal attorney to provide for us what we have been told is a binding term sheet that was signed by the parties under the agreement in October that would inform the questions relating to the commitments from our water utility that is a regulated utility, as well as Anchorage Hydropower, which is currently under ownership of the municipality, as the transaction with MLMP continues to proceed towards conclusion. So, Ms. Halser.
Nope, I need to extend first.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to extend this meeting to 1:30.
Second.
Motion to extend made by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by Ms. Brawley. I'm going to ask unanimous consent. Is there any objection? I'm not hearing any
Mr.
objection.
Chair, this is Scott. I can't stay on until 1:30. I just want to let you know I'll have to jump off.
It's okay if you can't stay on, but do you object to the extension?
No.
Okay, thank you. So hearing no objection, then we will extend to 1:30. And I'm sorry we'll lose you if we do, but that's okay. So the records will all be available for you after the meeting. Ms. Helzer.
Through the esteemed chair and the members of the esteemed assembly, the Department of Law is aware of the term sheet. And after a review of the term sheet, there are some provisions that prevent the municipality from producing this document to the public. It can be shared with the assembly. However, it does need to be shared in a manner such as that of executive session so that the confidentiality of the agreement can be protected.
All right, thank you. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Helzer. Can you please explain why this agreement is, or this term sheet is confidential and can't be shared in public?
Just like any confidentiality provision in any agreement, unfortunately for the public, this document was always intended to be kept confidential, and I do not have the ability to breach that provision. I can share the document in executive session, provided that there is some mechanism for keeping that from the public. And at this time, although I have consulted with the hydro owners, they sent me a letter yesterday indicating that no party shall have the authority to waive any applicable privilege or defense on behalf of any other party without such other party's written or electronic consent. To be clear, CHUGAC and MEA do not waive their rights under the agreement with respect to the term sheet between AWU and the owners.
Great. So it would be really great to get a copy of the letter, I think. And so I just want to make sure I fully understand. The confidentiality asserted is based on a confidentiality clause within the agreement itself. So it is by agreement of the parties that it remains confidential.
It is a bit more complicated than that. I just don't want to get too far into the subject because I would not want to expose the municipality to any breach of any provisions. But it goes further back than that to a common interest agreement that was reached in 2017.
And is the common interest agreement public document?
No, it is not.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to turn to legislative counsel and ask a few questions, if I may, because just trying to make sure I fully
Can I
understand.
ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Is it a binding agreement? No, the term sheet. Have we been bound?
Through the chair, my microphone doesn't appear to be working. Sorry. That's a question that may be subject to interpretation. So I would prefer to take that up into executive session and present the assembly, provided we have the understanding that it would not be produced publicly.
That's the dilemma, and this is where it would be great to hear from other attorneys on the question. If in fact there has been a term sheet that binds the municipality, I think we are going to have a disagreement, a difference of opinions, and that may come out in filings in the court. Ms. Alatel.
Thank you. I'd like legislative counsel to weigh in on Ms. Helzer's advice and opinion as to the confidentiality being based out of a term of the agreement itself. I'm really curious how that intersects with AWU being a public utility and a regulated utility, as well as Anchorage Hydropower also being a public utility and regulated utility, and the idea that usually documents produced by government or that government are party to are public records. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're hurt.
Through the chair to Vice Chair Zalatel. Just to clarify from the municipal attorney, the confidentiality provision you referred to is not a provision of the term sheet that was requested. Is that correct?
If I can rephrase your question, are you saying that the confidentiality provision is a provision that exists in the term sheet itself? Is that the question?
Yeah, your basis for citing confidentiality is not a provision of the term sheet itself, but as you said, it's more complicated. It's based on a previously signed agreement, correct?
That is correct.
So through the chair to Vice Chair Zalatel, I mean, generally within the public records jurisprudence of the state of Alaska, the provisions of the Alaska Public Records Act and the Anchorage Municipal Code generally define public records broadly and tilt towards disclosure, and the legislature's expressed an explicit preference in favor of disclosure in cases of records being deemed public records as opposed to retaining confidentiality. Essentially, the way the statute's written is the default is a record of a government agency or a public or state agency are the default is that they are public unless you can cite to a specific provision within either one of the exceptions provided within the Alaska Public Records Act or some case law that cites a common law principle that fits it into one of the exceptions of the Alaska Public Records Act. So generally, there aren't a whole lot of executed secret agreements, and I'm off the top of my head, I don't know of any that public agencies engage in and are able to preserve confidentiality.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. Follow-up question is, if we agree to go into executive session so that we can get a better idea of what might be in this agreement and whether or not, I think maybe even you might get a more fulsome picture of whether or not you believe it's confidential. Are we waiving any ability to assert that it is still a public document or that it could be a public document? One of the concerns always about going into executive session is we may lay the grounds for it, saying that we may view confidential information, but we could learn inside the executive session that, in fact, that information is not confidential. And I want to make sure that we don't necessarily waive some ability or right to assert that a document we may view in executive session should actually, in fact, be a public document.
Again, through the chair to Vice Chair Zalatel, as happened previously with this assembly when a theory of confidentiality was asserted by the administration.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, I'll speak up. Just because the assembly goes into executive session on the word of the administration or anybody who wants to present information to the assembly that they believe is more appropriate in executive session, it's not the assembly essentially waiving or adopting that legal theory. It's not an endorsement by the assembly of that legal theory. And the assembly has the right afterwards to assert that it's the document or the information in question should not be public, or sorry, should not be held confidential and should be made public. However, it would, as with the previous issue, it would be for a court to make that determination and not for the assembly to unilaterally just say it's a public document and start, handing out copies.
I have one more question. I think this is where I'm stuck, Ms. Helzer. At what point in a transaction that the administration engages in, or several administrations, do they have the authority to bind the assets, the properties, the rights of a utility without the assembly's authority?
Through the esteemed chair, I think that's a very large question, and you're sort of lumping a lot of things. There are certain transactions that do require assembly approval. And so I don't think I can answer that question without having a little bit more detail.
Ms. Zalatil, I guess at this point, we'll move on to item 6A on the agenda. Oh, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to see if there's a question in this, but I do want to express a comment and a frustration about I'm new to this whole project really, but I keep hearing references to the 1991 agreement, which of course, we are part of. And it seems like there's a very selective interpretation of how closely we stick to that. Because as I understand it, one of the things in the agreement was that the public process has to be equivalent to or as robust as the FERC process. It was obviously carved out. I understand the reasons why that happened at the time, but I just want to say that I think we should be consistent if we're citing the agreement and that we need to hold true to that agreement. There are parts of this that have not really been followed or not been fully considered, from what I'm understanding, including that we are supposed to make a good faith effort to restore the river for salmon. And that is an extremely important thing for Alaskans, not just Native Alaskans, but all Alaskans. That is part of our culture as a state and certainly as a community. So anyway, I appreciate that we're going to get into more of the legal detail, but I do want to note that it is frustrating to hear this inconsistency when citing the agreement when it seems to be in folks' favor, and then not so much when it's these other more difficult issues. So thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Cross.
Yeah, it's important to recognize that in District 2, almost all our community councils have come out for full restoration. So that's part of my concern here is why we didn't have more options. And to put it easy, because there's so much data and it's so compiled, the native village of Eklutna, if I can just describe, if you stole my car and then only offered me back a bicycle or a unicycle, I would not be too happy about it. Now, we know that the owners group purchased it at 10 cents, around 10 cents on the dollar, with the agreement that they were going to restore, make efforts. Okay, so I mean, I want to make sure that we're giving more options. And my concern is that the options are really good for the owners, but not so good for the people whose car was stolen. And so for me, representing my district, I want to know what all those options are. And I apologize if some of them are wildly inconvenient or expensive, but we should know what they are and they should all be brought forth. Thank you.
I forgot I had made arrangements for a couple of individuals to make testimony before we move to executive session, so they don't have to stick around for the number of hours it might take us to sort through the issues that were about to be presented. So we had 2 individuals sign up to speak for appearance request for the meeting of February 13th on the question of the Eklutna draft Eklutna plan. And so I am going to invite both of them to come and testify now, this is not a public hearing. It's not a public hearing item, but they had signed the paperwork and been approved to speak on this matter. But because a special meeting had been requested for the purpose of allowing the mayor to exercise his veto authority and us to exercise our right to override, I'm now going to invite Rick Sinnott to come up. And I'm told, Mr. Sinnott, you're speaking on behalf of the community council, so you will have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's, am I on?
You're on.
My name is Rick Sinnott. I'm the president of the Eklutna Valley Community Council. I'd like to talk to you about our community council's support for Eklutna restoration and to correct a major misunderstanding that's being perpetuated by the project's owners. And I thank the chair and the rest of the members for giving me this opportunity. On the drive to Anchorage today, I was listening to Joni Mitchell. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? A lot of people have come to realize that about the salmon and other fish and wildlife resources that have gone missing from Eklutna Lake and River in the past 85 years. The Eklutna Valley Community Council has been following this issue for 11 years. We've passed 2 resolutions in favor of restoring the river. 2016, we asked the mayor to direct MLMP to coordinate with the other project owners and the parties to the 1991 agreement to begin the necessary research and planning. Our second resolution last December recommended that the mayor and assembly support full restoration of the river and lake by removing the dam, or if that proved infeasible, we asked that fish passage into and out of the lake be provided, as well as year-round river flow rates consistent with those recommended by fisheries experts in the state and federal fish and wildlife agencies. The project owners have selected what they believe is the cheapest alternative. They call it the AWU portal alternative. This would tap into the Muni's water line about a mile below the dam and release water from there downstream. This alternative is completely inadequate. It totally ignores the lake and upstream tributaries and sockeye salmon. The preferred alternative would restore only about 1/3 of the watershed's potential fish habitat, and the amount of water released through the AWU pipeline would only be 3% of the river's historical summertime flow. If you multiply 35% of the habitat times 3% of the flow, you get 1%. The preferred alternative only intends to restore about 1% of the watershed's historic fish-related functions and values, 1%. This clearly does not satisfy the requirements of the 1991 agreement. Ironically, the owners haven't even picked the cheapest alternative. The least expensive alternative for taxpayers and ratepayers would be if a private organization volunteered to remove the dam. And that's exactly what the Conservation Fund, in cooperation with the native village of Eklutna, has offered. And then on to the misunderstanding. I've been told by several people recently that the owners are telling people that the AWU portal alternative is good enough because the scientific study found no historical evidence of salmon in Eklutna Lake. I'm one of the co-authors of that study, and what the owners are telling people is inaccurate, and they know it. Our study was published in 2017. It looked at core samples from the sediments at the bottom of the lake. The sediment layers resemble annual tree rings. If salmon had been in the lake before 1929, those annual layers should have included a percentage of a marine-derived isotope of nitrogen larger than the annual layers deposited after 1929 when salmon were blocked by the dam. The marine-derived isotope is incorporated into the flesh of salmon when they feed in the ocean and deposited in lake sediments when the fish bodies decay. The percentage of this nitrogen isotope in the sediments, measured with a mass spectrometer, usually correlates with numbers of salmon. We found no statistical difference before and after 1929. However, the study pointed out that the method doesn't work as well in large lakes with relatively high water turnover and modest populations of salmon. These appeared to be characteristics of Eklutna Lake, so we weren't completely surprised to find no historic evidence of salmon in the lake sediment layers. However, we were puzzled because there's written evidence and indigenous knowledge that states that salmon were in the lake. So we did a sensitivity analysis to determine how many salmon might have spawned in the lake without leaving a measurable trace. We found that as many as 15,000 salmon could have spawned in the lake annually without exceeding the analytical precision of the mass spectrometer. We noted at least 4 times in the article that there was historical documentation and based our analysis on as many as 15,000 salmon could have decomposed in the lake annually. Of course, this doesn't include all the salmon that spawned in upstream tributaries. It doesn't include the salmon that the Downey and even bears and eagles took out of the lake. And it doesn't include any salmon that died in the 11 miles of river below the lake or floated out of the lake before they decomposed. In other words, the Eklutna system could easily have supported many more than 15,000 spawning salmon every year. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Sinnott. And we have one other who had signed up for an appearance request and was approved for the 13th. Nellie Williams, you here? Welcome. So you are not representing community council, so you will have 3 minutes.
I will speak fast.
Please state your name and what part of town you're from. You'll have 3 minutes.
Nellie Williams. Hi there. My name's Nellie Williams. I live in South Anchorage. I'm a mom of 2 kids at ASD, and I'm a proud Anchorage resident for over 15 years. I'm also the Alaska director for Trout Unlimited. We're an organization dedicated to taking care of rivers that people love to fish. We employ Alaskans around the state. My staff are avid anglers. They are experts in fisheries. They're also coaches and pilots, and they share their moose meat with their neighbors. We have thousands of Alaskan members, and they range on the political spectrum from left to right. On behalf of 1,000 local residents who have spoken up in full support of restoring the Eklutna River, I'm here to say thank you for taking a strong stance on the Eklutna River restoration and advocating for a better solution than the AWU portal. I appreciated many of the comments made yesterday by some of you about this being an opportunity to look big picture and creatively problem solve. And I think together we can set a strong example for the country on how to have thriving communities alongside healthy runs of salmon. Trout Unlimited has been working with tribes and communities across the country to restore rivers. And following the stalwart leadership of the native village of Eklutna, We have been engaged in the technical review of the Eklutna mitigation for the past couple years. Despite strong science and vast community support, again, over 1,000 people have weighed in on this, the utilities have ignored the public, they've ignored NBE, and the expertise of numerous fish and wildlife experts. Right now, the plan put forward is a good example of throwing good money after a bad idea. More recently, Native Village of Eklutna, with TU's support and many others, have brought up another option for solving the problem, that's removing the dam. And while we recognize there are still questions that need to be answered, Trout Unlimited has been involved in successful dam removal projects all over the country. And I assure you that while complex, dam removal is doable and likely the strongest return on investment. Removing the dam is also very cost effective. The Conservation Fund and Trout Unlimited, both experienced in raising funds for this type of project, have committed to helping offset the costs. And because we are utility users as well, we're willing to wait a reasonable timeline for dam removal so that other energy sources have time to come online. The utility's current proposal is a shortcut to a dead river and continues to shortchange NBE and doesn't make a whole lot of logistical or economic sense. We can do better. Removing the dam and restoring Eklutna could be a story that Anchorage could really be proud of. It's our once-in-a-generation chance to make it happen. So thank you for being a part of the salmon-filled future for Alaska. We clearly have work to do, but please know there are a lot of people out there that are cheering for you and want a restored river.
Thank you. All right, so to the clerk, I would direct that we remove them from the agenda for the meeting of the 13th. And now we can move at least temporarily on to item 6A. Item 6A, draft Eklutna Fish and Wildlife Program and actions related to these issues, executive session. Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I make the motion, I'd like to request that we get a copy in open session of the letter Ms. Hauser referenced from Chugach Electric and Matanuska Electric Association, so it can be submitted via Assembly Information Memorandum to ride with this resolution. Because we raise the issue of not being able to see the agreement, and this provides context to that. Is that possible, Ms. Hauser?
I did inquire of the parties, and they did not provide permission to release the letter. So they understand the letter as part of the negotiations, subject to the confidentiality provisions. So we will be able to present that as well in executive session.
Government in the dark. Ms.
Okay,
Zolotel.
with that, I would move that we move into executive session to discuss a potential legal matter related to the assertion of confidentiality of the term sheet and the underlying agreement in light of the letter received by the Matanuska Electric Association and the Chugach Electric Association and the information provided by the municipal attorney today.
There's a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cross. So next I'll turn to our Assembly Council and ask, an executive session has been requested and is needed. Would you please lay the foundation to support a potential motion to move into executive session?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to AMC 230.036 Alpha, the Assembly may recess and meet in executive session to discuss a specific legal matter, including pending litigation. All information shared and gleaned in a session is confidential. An executive session is confidential. No official action may be taken in an executive session except to give direction to an attorney or a labeling negotiator regarding a specific legal matter pending litigation. The session shall be recorded. Recordings will be available to members of the body and authorized staff only, and may be discussed only in further executive session. The recording will become public at a date specified by the code for specific subject matters or by the Assembly if extended for good cause at the conclusion of the executive session. Any discussion which occurs at the executive session should only be discussed by this body in future executive session. Any members who need to leave during the executive session may leave, but may only be updated on the discussions after his or her departure in a subsequent executive session or by way of reviewing the recordings of this session. Special invitees, employees, staff members that the body determines are necessary to the conversation may remain in the meeting during executive session. The The Ethics Code states that no public servant shall use, disclose, release confidential information or non-public information gained through a person's municipal position unless authorized by law or order of the court. Any violations would be referred to the Board of Ethics. The code provides that the board may make recommendations for corrective action. Past recommended corrective actions have included financial penalties and other professional consequences. Additionally, the municipality may pursue civil action against an official where the release of confidential information adversely affects the outcome of litigation or negotiations or leads to increased financial liability. Additionally, such disclosure could also be subject the member of the body to a recall election. Pursuant to state statute, the grounds for recall include misconduct in office, incompetence, or failure to perform prescribed duties. A violation of municipal confidentiality obligations would meet this criteria. The code does not specifically provide for the collection or destruction of notes taken in executive session, but it has been past municipal practice to assure the confidentiality of discussions in executive session. If you'd like me or any member of the Assembly Council's office to collect and destroy your notes today, we are happy to. If you elect to take notes and retain them, I remind you that these notes would also be confidential, and failure to properly preserve their confidentiality would implicate the same consequences I've laid above. As stated, the vice chair today seeks to meet in executive session to discuss a specific legal matter. Mr. Chair, with that, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So I'll now ask for if there's any discussion about the question. I don't see any questions in the queue on the phone. On this question of going into executive session, members may proceed to vote.
Member Myers,
Yes.
Member Martinez,
Yes.
Member Rivera,
Yes.
Member Bronga,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Chair Constant,
Yes.
Vice Chair Zolotel,
Yes.
Member Cross,
Yes.
Member Voland,
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm going to say yes. The chair, I have to hop off the call probably as soon as we go into it.
All right. We'll have a number for you to call in if you get a chance. Go ahead.
Member Brawley,
Yes.
Member Salt,
I'll say yes, so I also have to drop at 1 o'clock.
that passes 11-0.
All right. So we now have a motion to go into executive session. I previously requested an email for a detailed list of who has represented whom on this project because we are going into executive session to have a discussion about legal strategy. There's a determination at this time that no members of the administration except the municipal attorney will be joining us in the executive session. Mr. Bowman has represented parties on both sides of the transaction according to an email from Ms. Helzer, both the hydropower and the municipality. And so at this point, because we'll be discussing legal strategy, it's not in the best interest of the municipality to invite anyone but the municipal attorney to participate with us. Ms. Halser.
Through the chair, I did take it upon myself to invite some people. I understand this is your prerogative, but I came into this very late in the process, and I don't have the full historical knowledge base. So I had asked if Mike McLaughlin, I feel terrible putting him on the spot, but he does represent AWU and has represented AWU in this particular transaction, and I feel it would be very helpful to have him there.
Welcome. And we would also, because representation is going to be there from AWU, we would have the director of AWU,
The client.
the client.
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you. So with that, we will now adjourn to executive session. What that means is everyone has to go out into the main hall, other than those who are invited to stay.
Mr. Constant, I also wanted to have Kent there.
The dilemma is that the mayor, we are,
Okay.
the mayor went to Juneau, amended a document that was our legislative program and expressly stated he is oppositional to our interests. And I'm afraid, Kent, I would love to have you here, but at this point, I can't separate the manager's interest from the mayor's interest. And I believe we're going to find ourselves in a legal
Please enter
strategy.
your participant or moderator code, followed.
Well, I think there might be a lot of clarity when we
Please
get
say your
into the
name,
executive
follow-
session, and I think you'll find it would be useful to have the municipal manager there, but it's your prerogative
In what role?
as the client of the municipality, the municipal manager.
Just, can we just hold on a second? I can't hear very well.
It's fine if you don't want to do it.
And it's not that I don't want you here, Kent. I just don't know how to square the interests. And that's where a lot of this has really broken down, in my opinion, is whose interests are at stake. How about this? Can we keep you on hold and on specific questions, have you come in?
It'll take me a few minutes.
Obviously, got to do your work.
I'm out, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be on hold as well if you need me.
Thank you.
If you need me, I'm on hold.
Do we have members calling back in?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Felix.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Scott. I'm here as well.
I can't quite hear you, Scott. It's a little noisy in the room.
I was just letting you know I'm on the call as well.
Thank you. We want to keep you half an hour if we can.
Yeah, I will, thank you.
Here's the
Thank you.
forms. That's the statute. Here's the letter from
We can
Mrs.
pass that
Naughton.
over
This is my binder on the,
on all the stuff.
yeah, so there in there is the 1991 agreement, and there is, so here's the draft study results, here's the draft fish and wildlife program.
This is all published anyway, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's
Just if you need to refer to it, 1991 agreement, and then the 1984 agreement. So here's the binding term sheet again.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay,
Be
so I think I should
available
mark
if you
these
need me.
confidential. right?
They are. Privately confidential. This one is not, but you're welcome to mark it however you want.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
I'm sorry to call.
Recommend waiting to hand them out till we go through the whole initial process because we have to do introductions and on the record and because we're not quite in executive session yet. Told the live feed is still up.
Yeah, it won't go until we just record.
Okay, perfect. All right, Madam Clerk.
Member Brawley,
Here.
Member Bronga,
You know, we may be having phone issues. Let's make sure she got it.
I don't see her.
Yeah, I think because we switched phones.
Chair Constant,
Here.
Member Cross,
Here.
Member Johnson,
Here.
Member Martinez,
Here.
Member Myers,
Here.
Member Perez Verdia is excused.
He's trying to call in.
Okay. Member Rivera,
Present.
Member Salt. Member Volland.
Both of them had to step off.
Vice Chair Zolotel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Ms. Braga, are you there? If you are, we can't hear you. Yeah, so, and then in the rest in the room, we have
Mark Corsentino, General Manager of Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility.
Michael McLaughlin from Guess and Rudd Regulatory and other counsel for AWW.
Ann Helzer, Municipal Attorney.
the clerk
Deputy Municipal Clerk Jasmine Akers.
and the interpreters.
Sign language interpreter Natalie Page and Gina Ashman.
Thank you. All right, so now we'll, also the attorneys.
Legislative Council of the Assembly, Matthew Hurt.
Dean Gates, Assembly Council.
And now, I know this feels like make work, but we're gonna take one more roll. Let's stop the tape, start it again. The purpose being